Don't do this. Don't do that. I told you to do this. I told you to do that. Do we hear these kinds of things? Well, yeah, these are called boundaries. A lot of times what happens is we set up boundaries and we don't keep them locked on tight. So what we're going to be talking about today is setting those boundaries and keeping those boundaries. This is for your own sanity. I'm telling you, this is for your own sanity. It is hard at the beginning to do, but we're going to talk about how you can make it easier and easier and easier. So stick around. You're going to really want to hear this. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, boundaries were a thing in my family, but they weren't upheld. And so I learned some really bad traits. And today we're going to be talking about setting boundaries, how important it is to not only set those boundaries, but to keep those boundaries. I'll share a little bit of my perspective from my own childhood, but I have with us Jen Anderson, and she is an expert in this topic of setting boundaries and keeping them set. So before we really get started, Jen, I would love for you to just introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. So I am Jen Anderson, and I created Thankful Hearts Coaching for women who are ready to make themselves the priority. They're done feeling like they're getting walked all over. They're done being the yes person. They're done taking care of everyone, and they just want to be the priority. They want to say yes to themselves. And so that's really where this comes from. I had to learn a lot of the hard things on how to make myself the priority. And so that's why this is my passion. And boundaries is a huge part of this. I actually have a motto that runs through my business, and it's beliefs plus boundaries equals bliss, which is shifting limiting beliefs and setting healthy, empowering boundaries helps us to find our true bliss. And so this is just my passion, and my great joy is to support these women.
Wait, what'd you say? Beliefs plus boundaries equals bliss?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. That's a writer downer, y'all. Write that one down. I love what you're doing because, as I shared, alluded to at the very beginning, is that, my childhood, there was this confusion, I'll say, within the household that, I would ask mom something and she would say, go ask your dad. I would go ask my dad, and my dad would say, most of the times his answer was no. Like, that's why I never went to dad first, because his answer was always no. And then I would go tell mom, he said no. And then later he would change his mind. And so this was the pattern that I learned at such a very young age. And I realized, I was like, oh, okay, if I could go for the no, then he'll turn it to yes, because I got my way like all the time. And it was probably because I went crying or whatever. But I got to tell you, that behavior that I grew up in helped me to learn that I didn't want to do that to my kids. And so I was very strict. If I said yes, I meant yes. If I said no, I meant no. And I very rarely said maybe. And then if I said maybe, I did evaluate. And so what my kids learned is that when you set a boundary, that's what it is. And this really backfired on me later with my own kids, because they, I remember one day my daughter, I think she was 18, and she asked me something, and I said no. And then I changed my mind to yes. And she said, what? You can't change your mind. You've never changed your mind. And I said, but you're 18 now. You're an adult. It's different. It's like, it's a different life, And so it's been an interesting journey, myself going to this person who's a hardliner, and then now to be more lenient, relaxed and stuff, as my kids became adults. And so anyway, that's like unpacking okay, now go ahead and evaluate me.
Well, there's a lot in there, actually.
Yeah, there is a lot in there.
Yeah. Because here's the thing. So one of the things that I really work with women on is, instead of answering them in the moment, taking a minute to pause and giving themselves a moment to think about it. So one of the things I find all the time is like they want to know. And I'm like, yeah, but you have every right to say to them, I need to think about it. I'll get back to you. And then make sure you do get back to them. Don't make them come back to you to find out what you thought or what you decided, but get back to them. And so that's a huge part of the whole boundary setting. And the other thing with boundaries, there's a few things, but there's a couple other big things. And that is...
Before you go there, then let's talk about the first one, right? So we were talking about reaction versus responding, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's a big one because I know that I think most people are reactionary to things,
Yes.
and it's really hard for us to realize that, I'm reacting. I need to pause. So what do you recommend? What is a technique you use or that you help people use to maybe the first is having that awareness, the awareness that I'm reacting.
Yep.
And then let me pause.
Yep.
And then respond instead. So what is something that we can use as a tool that can help us to catch all that before it's happening? Because it's going to be damaging. I got to say, as a child, this was extremely damaging to me because I went to my relationships thinking that everybody was going to change their mind. Like I thought I was going to get my way my whole life. And that has not happened, since I left the household with my current husband. I remember the day that I realized that, he is not my dad. I'm not going to get my way this time. And that was heartbreaking.
Yes.
So anyway, go back to that reaction versus.
So there's a few things you can do, but one of the things that I always tell clients is to get yourself one script. So if you don't want to answer in the moment, this is my go-to, and I call it my back pocket script. So I always say, think in your back pocket. When we were younger, we always used to carry stuff, I always had important stuff in my back pocket so that you can pull it out of your back pocket when you need it. So I just always say, I need to check with my spouse, my calendar, whatever that is. And I put it on auto loop. So anytime somebody asks me something and I maybe don't want to answer them, or I don't feel comfortable doing it, but I'm also not comfortable telling them no, because that's a whole thing too, is that I just have to say, I have to check my calendar. They don't have to know that everything in my calendar is also in my phone. Or I can use my husband. I can say, I got to check with my husband and I'll get back to you, but I got to check with my husband. He helps me make decisions. They don't have to know whether or not I'm the sole person that makes the decisions, which sometimes I'm not. So, it's not a lie, but having that script ready and memorizing it and knowing that it's there. And so a really great way to have it prepared is to stand in front of the mirror and just play out scenarios with yourself. Just stand there and play those scenarios out, and then say it so that you can watch your face. You can hear your tone of voice. You get to notice those things so that when you're caught in the moment, you're not like, I got to check my calendar. And you're not making it crazy for them. So that's probably the biggest thing that I teach women to do. And that helps a lot.
I think another way would be, I love that. That's verbally, right? But then if we have written, because oftentimes we have to set those boundaries also in an email and a text message, and Messenger and WhatsApp, all those different places, and to practice there too. Because I know that when I would say no to people, even if it was written, I had a hard time.
Yeah.
I had a hard time.
Absolutely. And they can also make files.
Hit send.
Yeah, you can make files and have things ready to just copy and paste.
That's a good idea.
You have something that's appropriate, so you're not giving it a lot of extra thought that way. You don't have the time to overthink it. You just go in there, you grab the one that's most appropriate, stick it in your message, and hit send, and be done.
Yeah,
if you start overthinking it, you're not going to send it.
Because then you have that emotional attachment when you start overthinking it and then start overanalyzing, and then you don't do it, and then you change the language. The next thing you know, you're being stepped on.
Yes, exactly.
Speaking from experience.
You feel resentful and you feel forced. And those are two things you don't want.
Yeah.
So yeah.
For you or for them, right? That's not good for them either. If we're doing something, we feel resentment. We're not putting our whole being into it. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Now let's go to the next. So I interrupted you on that one because I wanted to talk about that. Okay, so what's
Well,
another boundary setting?
so you kind of just led into the one, and that is boundaries are really meant to be kind. So think of it this way. If you're telling somebody, boundaries are meant to teach people how to treat you. They're not meant to shut somebody out or keep people away from us. They are literally there to teach people how to treat us. So if you're telling people what you expect from them and how you will handle it if it's not happening, that's the kind thing to do. You don't say it meanly, you don't say it as a threat. You just simply say, if you can't respect my wishes, I'm going to leave the conversation. I had a guy that he wasn't really my boss, but he kind of thought he was in a previous job. And he would always come into my office just loud as could be and barking thing. I always said he was barking orders and just barking things at me. And finally, one day I said, I would love to help you, but only when you can talk to me like I'm a human. And I actually used this phrase with him. I said, I feel like your human verbal punching bag, and I don't like it. And I said, I'm done. I said, so I'm asking you to leave my office when you can talk to me like I'm a human. Be happy to help you. My office door is open. But if you can't and you got to come in here barking at me, my office door is shut to you. I don't have it. And he never came back in that way. He very much came in a calmer fashion. And I felt like there was a respect there that I never got before.
And hopefully he applied that in other areas of his life as well.
I hope he did too.
Yeah.
I can't, I can't control that. And so that's, I've often thought about that. But I hope he did too. But if he didn't, I know he did with me. So that's really where boundaries, and I will tell you, that was not an easy boundary for me to set. It took me a long time to practice that one. Like I would practice it in front of the mirror. I would think of the scenarios and I would practice it, because when I am someone who, when I get upset, I get tongue-tied. I cry. I get angry, all those things that we do, right? And so I had to be able to say it without having that happen. I had to be able to say it in a calm manner where I was succinct with what I was telling him. And that's the other thing with boundaries, is being clear. So kind and clarity. Those are two really good words when you think of boundaries to keep handy. Am I being kind and am I being clear?
Yeah, it's interesting, that scenario that you mentioned there with the guy who thought he was your boss is, if I'm thinking about, I had 49 jobs in 36 years. So I had a lot of those types of scenarios that happened, but I'm thinking about it from the perspective of, as an employee, by setting that boundary that you did, you potentially were creating a risk of you being fired, for you being insubordinate. Let's just say like that. Mm-hmm. I'm saying like from not you yourself, but from the scenario. And so if, talking to somebody right now who's listening, who's in is experiencing something like that right now, what do you recommend that they do to ensure that they're not potentially creating this conflict that can create them being fired, them being let go, or them being just to the point of like, I got to quit, I can't do it anymore? Like, what do you recommend for that person?
Well, that is really where being able to be calm when you make the boundary comes in handy. Because if you come back at them with all the force that they come at you with, then you are being insubordinate. Then you're not being any better than they are. But if you can come at them with a clear, kind, calm voice and just say, I just really don't appreciate the way you talk to me. And if it's a true boss, you may not have any other choice. Like, they may still fire you. They may still make your life miserable. They may not change. You don't really have any other choice. Then you have to evaluate and decide what's most important to you.
Yeah.
To me, my energy and my mental health was most important. So it was getting out of that environment, would have been, to me, if it hadn't changed, would have been the thing to do. But I think if you can keep it calm and clear, and maybe even it's something after the fact, so the situation happens and you let it happen. And then, especially if it's a boss, and then maybe a day later or a couple of hours later, you schedule some time to talk to your boss and say, hey, I don't function very well when you treat me this way. It really upsets me, and I make a lot more mistakes because of this. Like, I've had some clients that tell me some things like that,
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's a whole thing. And so is there any way we could do it a little different? Is there a different way you could approach? I'm assuming like this would be in a situation where something didn't go right, or, is there any way you could approach that differently with me so that I don't feel this tension, this anxiety, and I don't continue to just make mistakes for you? Like, I want to be a better employee, and I'm asking for your help for that.
I like that. Yeah, I think that, being, having 49 jobs, as you can imagine, like, I left because my boundaries were overstepped. And so I'm the type that's like, I'm just not going to take it. I'm just going to leave. And that's how I used to be. I'm not like that anymore. But, but it is interesting how, our past comes into our future, our present and our future. And we get to determine in this very moment how we're going to respond and or react from this point forward. So it's really on our, it's on us. We can't blame somebody else for doing this. Then this is how I reacted to it. But no, it's up to us to decide how we're going to respond and or react in the future. So this is something this is what you help people do, right? Is you help them to, again, let's say, for lack of a better term, gain control of their lives, gain control of yourself, get control of yourself, girl.
Yes. Well, I always like to say I help women live life on their own terms. So you get to live the life that you want to live.
So you got to know what your own terms are.
Yes.
Right. And that's part of it. I think, that's part of it.
And that's something we work on. We work on core values. We work on, beliefs. Like, what do you want to believe in? What do you really want? Like, dreaming. What do you want your life to look like? All of those things are part of this, because when your boundaries are being crossed, it's because somebody's butting up against one of your values. We set our boundaries based on our values and what we value in life, what we want out of life, how we want our life to look. So when we get that and we know what that is, it's easier to set and uphold the boundaries, because I'm not going to let anybody. One of my biggest core values is integrity, running my business in integrity, living my life in integrity. And I'm not going to let anybody jeopardize that to the point where I would lose my business, or to the point where I'm lying to people, or I'm not upholding the principles that I believe in. Yeah. And so then that's an easy boundary for me to set, because it'd be an easy no. I'm sorry, I'm not doing that thing because it doesn't uphold to what I want.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you're speaking there was something you mentioned about, our core values. And here's from my perspective is I didn't know what my core values were until I worked with somebody. So I worked with a life coach for 5 months, and she's the one who helped me to see my core values. And the reason for that, I grew up in a very volatile, abusive, alcoholic household. I was a people pleaser. And as a people pleaser, I adopted other people's values. And I thought that was the way life was. And so I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what my values were. I was living my life based on other people. And so this was a huge, like you mentioned, that knowing your core values is a huge indicator for you going forward to say, is this encroaching on this value? Or like, where is this encroaching on my values? Like in my business, like we have our core, I'm looking over here because they're right up here. They're sitting right here. And anytime I'm like, is this going to keep us in line with our core values or not? I look at that list to see yes or no. And then I make a decision based on that. And then doing that with our personal lives is so important as well. So, people, okay, I'm going to switch the gears here. Let's
Can I
talk
add
about,
one thing to that
oh,
real
yes,
quick?
of course, of course.
Well, so I just really want to say that, Linda, you're not in the abnormal side of it. Like, I didn't know my core values until about 10 years ago. I just knew I was the person I was. I've never really shifted from that, but I wasn't raised to have boundaries. I wasn't raised to know my values. Like, none of that was really there. There might have been a little under the surface, but it wasn't talked about. Like, we didn't practice it. Most people don't know their core values unless they've worked in a high powered job where they have to have values for like a business, for like a company, or somewhere somebody has taught them. But most of the women that I coach are in their 40s and 50s. And I say the word core values and they go, I don't have any idea what that is. Like, we can spend a whole month on that in coaching, just making sure that they remember to bring them back in. So it's not it's not a normal thing. At least it wasn't in our generation, to be raised to know what your core values were and why you should live by them. So I just wanted to say that for anybody listening, like, you're not abnormal for that. Like, that's really very much the standard.
Yeah, it's interesting. It does take, I truly believe it does take an outside person to help you with this, like learning this, because we're living in our own little bubble, and so it's really important. Yeah, I was 51 when I started to go down that path, like I didn't learn my core values when working with the life coach, but she's the one who opened that door and helped me to start to look at it and look at my life, to stop, pause, and look at my life and see what I'm doing. So let's switch to family.
Okay.
Let's switch to family boundaries. Okay, so you work with women, and women have maybe like sisters, mothers, fathers, children, husband, spouse, animals. Like, you have a couple cats right there, right? And so how do we, if, like, let's say, for example, I'm going to use my life as an example, just because this is the best way for me to do this. So I had a first marriage. I left that marriage because I realized that I was going down the path of my mom, which was, my dad was very abusive. I was going down that same exact path. So I left that marriage, and then I got into a new marriage. So I come into this new marriage, and I have all that baggage that I'm carrying along with me, that I've been carrying around for 25 years. And because I met him when I was 25, and I'm carrying all that baggage around with me, and I bring it into this new marriage. And I go through life with him, thinking that he's just like my dad, or so I get to do these different things or what have you. And fear comes into the marriage because I had tremendous amount of fear, from my childhood that I carried around with me. So now I'm in this new marriage with this new man, and we've been together for 37 years, by the way, and absolutely love each other. So it's been an amazing marriage. But at the beginning, like, I had all these fears. I had all these preconceived ideas that I had from my past. I carried them into this marriage. And I went on for 20 years in the marriage, living as if I was still that person from the past. So setting boundaries after 20 years, I'm using this as an example because, like, let's say 20 years goes by, and now I'm trying to set boundaries. So how do we approach this kind of situation? For me, it was actually 30 years before I started to set boundaries, not 20. But when we're already in a relationship, what's the kind way to start to set those boundaries without fear of reprisal?
Communication. Open, honest communication. That is the simple answer to it. So if somebody sees you one way for so long, and you start to shift and they start to see you differently, you have to have honest, open communication with them. Or if after 30 years, you no longer want to tolerate what they're doing, you kind of have to go to them and say, hey, I'm growing, I'm maturing, I'm coming into another season of life, and this isn't acceptable for me anymore. It's one of my non-negotiables. And so then, therefore, you have a conversation with them about it. What are their non-negotiables? Like, you guys start working through how that works for you. But that's how you set them with kindness and clarity, because you have to go to them and talk to them. You can't just start making changes and start shifting things and being mad at them for doing the same thing, because that's not going to do anybody any good. And you also have to understand and know they may not want to change. They may not be there. They may not want to grow with you. And then you have to decide how you're going to handle that. And it's tough. And if we just stay, then we stay kind of stagnant, or we are compromising our values. And if we go, then we know we have to, do something different. But most of the time, I think most people are pretty receptive if you go to them and you talk to them and you say, hey, I love you, especially if it's a spouse. Like, hey, I love you, but things are changing for me. And I'm just asking for a conversation around this topic or this thing, or can we just start an open dialogue and start talking about some of the things that maybe bother us that we've never talked about?
Yeah, this reminds me when one day my husband came to me, he said, I don't think I like the person you're becoming. And this was after I started I worked with my life coach. And then after that, I started, I kept on on this personal development journey. He's like, because you're not the same person. I say, you're exactly right. I'm not the same person. I'm never going to be that same person again. Yep. So we, talking through it. And then there was this one time that I came to him, and I'm going to share this because if you are a person, like my husband and I are people of faith. And so I had a conversation that I needed to bring up to him because it was bothering me a lot. And so we sat down. First I said, hey, can we talk? And he's like thinking I'm going to tell him I'm cheating, which was not the case at all. But right. So he had all these thoughts that were going through his head, right? So anyway, we sit down, and the first thing I said is I said, we're going to pray. I'm going to pray. And here's my exact prayer. Lord, please allow the words that come out of my mouth to be heard through his ears as they are intended. Yes. Because we are hearing through our own filter. And so I wanted him to hear what I was saying, not what he thought I was saying. And it was one of the best conversations we ever had. So, and I was scared. I was scared. It took me about 5 or 6 days to finally come to that point of saying, okay, because it was 5 or 6 days of saying, I need to talk to him. Mm-hmm. But it was like months leading up to that. Right. But then that 5 or 6 days of I got to talk to him. I was terrified. Is he going to leave me?
Of course.
And here we are still together.
Yeah. But the thing is that he knew you were upset about something. More than likely, he knew something was going on, which was why he jumped to the worst case scenario. So the quicker we can have those, I want you to be prepared. Like, that is a thing I will always say. Always be prepared, know what you're going to do. But the quicker you can do it, the easier I feel like the easier it usually is. And sometimes too, what I do with clients in those situations is I'll say, write out all your worst case scenarios. Write out all those things. And now let's throw that paper away, because 99% of the time, it's never as bad as our worst case scenario.
That's for sure.
It's almost always better. We just had a situation like that. I actually probably shouldn't say that one. It's always better. It's a little close to home and somebody might hear it. So I better leave that one alone.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyways.
Well, we're talking to Jen Anderson. She is one of the authors in this book right here. Hold on. This book right here, Passion, Purpose, and Possibilities. If you are interested in connecting with Jen to see how she can help you to set those boundaries and uphold those boundaries, please reach out to her. You can go to thankfulheartscoaching.com. That's thankfulheartscoaching.com. Now, Jen, in this book, the Passion, Purpose, and Possibilities book, the title of your chapter is Awaking in the Ordinary, the journey from feeling average to living aligned. Why don't you share with us just a little bit about your chapter without giving it away?
Yeah. So I told you earlier that you weren't abnormal for not having those things, not it was just all very average. And I just I'm the person, I'm probably one of the least people out of okay, so here I graduated dead in the middle of our high school class. So we had like 300 and some people, and I was right in the middle. So I was never like this extraordinary person. I just was very average. And for me to be somebody who comes out and starts working on books and finding my purpose, I guess I never thought I was going to. I didn't think that's really what you did. And so I think that's really why this is such a passion for me, and why I loved this book and being a part of this book so much, because it really gave me an opportunity to feel more than when almost my whole life I have felt very average.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your story. And this really is a great book, Passion, Purpose, and Possibilities. You can get a copy by going to actiontakerspublishing.com/passion. That's actiontakerspublishing.com/passion. So Jen, why don't you share with our audience, what's the final word of the day that you would like to share with the audience?
Well, that's a good question. I think the thing I want you to know is that it's never too late. You're always right where you're supposed to be. And if you want to make changes, if you want to start setting boundaries, you can do that. If you're ready, you can do that. I've had clients in their 60s and 70s that have made change, that come back to me and they're like, I just can't believe I didn't know this back then. And so you're never too late. You are right where you need to be, and just do it. Just start. Take one very small step and start. And if that is just figuring out what your core values are, Google core values and just see what pops up and what makes you smile, what really hits your heart. Those are your core values. Start there. It's an easy way to start.
I love that. Yeah. Just, you are never too old, to start something new, to try something new. And I love how you have people who have, 70 years old. That's the thing, is setting boundaries and learning to set those boundaries and uphold those boundaries is so freeing. It really does create freedom. Now you can connect with Jen at thankfulheartscoaching.com. Go check it out. See how she can help you to set those boundaries. And I know you want to say something after what I just said there about, setting those boundaries, how freeing it is.
Yeah. So that is the best thing ever, because when you set the boundaries, I said this earlier, but you're really teaching people how to treat you. And that's the best gift you can give yourself, because then you get to be treated the way you want to. You're not being treated the way somebody assumes you need to be treated.
Yeah, that's such an important piece. And I'm looking up a quote here because it's one of my favorites that Kathy Dirksen talks about it all the time. It's by Howard Thurman. It says, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and go do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. By setting your boundaries, learning how to set those boundaries and uphold those boundaries, you will come alive. It can be scary at the beginning, but trust me, anything that's scary is worth doing, because it will change your entire life. I broke through a fear every day for a year in 2015, and my entire life has shifted and changed for the better. So I'm definitely a testament to that. So if this is something that you're interested in, again, reach out to Jen by going to thankfulheartscoaching.com. Go there, check it out, and see how she can help you to set those boundaries. Jen, thanks so much for being here, for sharing your message and sharing your story and passion, purpose, and possibilities. It's such a good one. So thank you so much. Truly appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. If you like this interview, please share it out. And if you are watching us on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe and do all that stuff. And we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.